Everyone at the Dusty County auction burst into laughter when a small, dirty-faced 10-year-old girl stepped forward from the crowd. She was clutching a few crumpled dollar bills in her trembling hands. She wasn't there to buy toys. She wasn't there to buy livestock. She was there for him, a dying, retired police German shepherd who could barely stand on his feet. The auctioneer announced, "This dog is sick. A retired police dog and not worth much? Just $1. People turned away in disgust. The crowd erupted in cruel laughter. "No one wants a broken dog," someone shouted. "He won't survive the week," another whispered. "Who would even waste money on him?" But the little girl stood still among the mocking crowd. Then she walked straight to the rusty cage, her eyes locking onto the dog's dull, fading gaze, as if she already understood his pain. He couldn't speak, but his eyes screamed for help. Someone shouted, "Kid, that dog ain't worth $1. This isn't a pet store." But the girl didn't blink. She looked straight at the red-faced auctioneer and whispered the words that made the entire crowd fall silent. "I'm buying this dog, no matter what." People laughed at her again. Some shook their heads in pity. Others pulled out their phones, amused by the sight of a child wasting her savings on a dying animal that even the police department had given up on. But none of them knew the truth. None of them knew who that dog really was. And when the truth finally exploded, the entire town froze in shock. Stay with us, because this story will leave you absolutely speechless. But before we begin this incredible journey, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe so you never miss a story. And really, I'm curious about our community. Where are you watching from right now? Drop your country's name in the comments below. I love seeing how far these stories travel around the world. Dust swirled across the old ranch auction yard as the midday sun beat down mercilessly on weathered wooden pins and worn cowboy boots. The air buzzed with chatter, betting, and bursts of rough laughter, the kind that made even strong men feel uneasy. But today, that laughter had a sharper, crueler edge, because today, something unusual was happening. A small, dust-covered 10-year-old girl stepped through the crowd, clutching a fistful of wrinkled bills in her trembling hands. Her shirt was faded, her jeans were patched at the knees, her hair was wild from the wind and worry. She looked completely out of place among the tall men in cowboy hats and heavy boots. But what drew the most attention wasn't the girl. It was the creature behind her, a German shepherd, skinny, limping, his fur patchy and dull. He struggled to keep up with the auctioneer's pace. Every step made his legs shake uncontrollably. His once strong posture, the posture of a proud officer, had collapsed into something fragile and defeated. His ribs showed through his skin. His eyes, those deep, intelligent police dog eyes, looked tired, almost apologetic, as if he were sorry for still being alive. And that was enough to set the men laughing again. One cowboy elbowed another. "Look at that mutt. Should have been put down months ago." Another snorted. "What's the kid gonna do? Try to save him with pocket money?" The auctioneer, a large man with a booming voice, banged his gavel on the podium. "Next up, one retired police dog, injured, sick, no returns, no complaints, sold as is." His tone made it clear. This dog wasn't worth much, not to him, not to the crowd, not to anyone except her. The girl stepped closer, swallowing hard as the men's heavy footsteps scraped the dirt behind her. She looked up at the auctioneer, her heart pounding in her chest. I want to buy him," she said softly, but her voice didn't shake. A wave of laughter rolled through the yard like thunder. "To buy him?" one cowboy barked. "Sweetheart, that dog's more trouble than a rattlesnake in a feed sack." Another shouted, "Let her. Good entertainment for the day." But the girl didn't flinch, didn't look back, didn't let the laughter touch her. Her eyes remained locked on the dog. who lowered himself weakly onto the dirt beside her, as if sensing she was the only safe thing in this entire place. For one quiet moment, the wind paused. The laughter drifted away, and the girl held out her small fist of crumpled cash. "I'll take him," she whispered, and though the men didn't know it yet, this was the moment everything began to change. The auctioneer stared at the girl like she had spoken a foreign language. Her tiny hand held out the wrinkled money. Her fingers were smudged with dirt. Her knuckles scraped as if she had fallen more than once on her long walk here. The men behind her muttered and laughed again, but she didn't turn around. Not even a glance. Her focus didn't waver. "What's your name, kid?" the auctioneer asked, half amused, half annoyed. "Emily," she said. "I'm 10. Her voice was small but clear, the kind of voice that wasn't used to being heard, yet desperately needed to be. The auctioneer raised an eyebrow. "And Emily, you know this dog is sick, right? Can't work, can't herd, can't even stand straight." Emily nodded once. "I know." She didn't add anything else. She didn't need to. Her eyes were already saying the rest. Behind her, the injured German shepherd attempted to sit straighter. His tail barely twitched. His breath was shallow. His ears drooped with exhaustion. But the moment Emily stepped closer, he lifted his head just a little, as if trying to match her quiet courage. One cowboy scoffed loudly. "Why you want that useless dog, girl?" Emily tightened her grip on the bills. "He's not useless." That earned another round of laughter. Loud, mocking. The kind adults usually reserve for something they don't understand. Emily didn't blink. She had walked 3 miles to get here. She had hidden the money, a small collection of birthday dollars, odd jobs, and coins she'd saved for almost a year, inside a cracked metal lunchbox, so her mother wouldn't find it. She had waited for the monthly ranch auction, hoping with every step that the rumors were true. A broken police dog was being sold off today, and when she'd first seen him, shivering, limping, ribs outlined under dusty fur, her heart had clenched, not in fear, in recognition. She knew what it looked like when someone had been left behind. The auctioneer sighed, scratching his chin. "Kid, this ain't a pet. This dog's seen things, been through things. Animals like him don't bond easy." Emily looked up, and for the first time, her voice grew firm. "That's okay. I'll still take him." A hush fell over the closest row of cowboys. Not respect, just surprise. She stood there like someone far older, far wiser than 10. Like she had already decided that no amount of mockery, no number of boots stomping around her, no insults shouted from weathered faces could push her back. The dog crawled the last inch between them, pressing his weak body against her legs. Emily didn't step away. She didn't gasp. She simply rested her hand on his head, and he closed his eyes. It was the first peaceful moment he'd felt in months, and the first time the men noticed this little girl was not someone to underestimate. For a long moment, the auctioneer simply stared at the girl, at Emily, at the crumpled bills in her hand, at the dog leaning weakly against her leg as if she were the last steady thing in his collapsing world. Then he exhaled sharply. "All right then. If you really want him." He reached for the money, but before his fingers touched it, a cowboy shouted from behind. "Hold up. She can't just buy him like that. Let's see how much she's got." The crowd shifted, boots scraping against dirt as men leaned in, smelling a joke. Emily instinctively stepped back, shielding the dog with her small body. The shepherd let out a low, protective rumble, weak but determined. A few of the men laughed harder at that. The auctioneer unfolded the bills. 110, a 5, 3 ones, some coins still clinging to each other. $18, he muttered. The laughter exploded again. $18? That's not even enough for a vet to look at him. Kid thinks she's buying candy at a gas station." Emily's cheeks flushed crimson, but she didn't lower her hand. She didn't take the money back. She just waited. The auctioneer rubbed the back of his neck, looking uncomfortable. Well, the reserve price for a dog like this, even in his condition, is supposed to be 20. Emily swallowed hard. She'd known this might happen. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the very last thing she owned, a worn silver button. Her father's. She had carried it for a year, ever since he'd given it to her before being deployed, telling her, "Whenever you feel scared, hold this. It'll remind you you're stronger than you think." She placed it gently on top of the bills. The cowboy beside the auctioneer snorted. "What's that supposed to be? Some kind of toy?" Emily shook her head. "It's worth something to me," she whispered. "Please." The auctioneer stared at her, really stared at her this time. Something flickered in his expression, maybe pity, maybe respect, maybe just the sudden realization that this wasn't a joke to her. He let out a long breath. "Sold." The gavel slammed down. The laughter around her cut off mid-echo, surprised by how quickly the decision was made. One cowboy spat into the dirt. Another muttered something under his breath about soft-hearted auctioneers. But none of that mattered. The moment the wooden echo faded, Emily knelt beside the dog. "You're mine now," she said softly. "You're safe." The shepherd blinked slowly, trying to understand the gentleness in her voice, something he hadn't felt in weeks, maybe months. He tried to lift his paw toward her, a trembling, shaky motion that nearly tipped him over. She caught him before he fell. Behind her, a cowboy scoffed. "That dog ain't making it through the week." Another added, "She'll be back crying when he keels over." Emily ignored them. Instead, she slid her arms under the dog's frail body. He was heavier than he looked, but she pulled him close anyway. The dog pressed his head into her shoulder as if finally surrendering to the idea that someone, just one person in this world, might actually care if he lived. The cowboys watched in stunned silence as she staggered to her feet, adjusting her grip until she could carry him. It wasn't graceful. It wasn't easy. But she didn't complain. She didn't ask for help. She started walking. The dog's weak heartbeat thumped against her chest. The crowd parted, not out of kindness, but because something about the sight of this tiny girl carrying a dying police dog through the dusty auction yard felt wrong to interrupt. A few men exchanged uneasy looks, because deep in their gut they sensed something none of them wanted to admit. This wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning. The dusty road stretched endlessly before Emily as she walked, the sick police dog cradled in her arms. Each step sent jolts of pain up her small legs, but she kept moving, slow, steady, determined. The men's laughter faded behind her, swallowed by the wind. But her mind wasn't in the auction yard anymore. It drifted back to the morning everything changed. Her house had always been small, but it had been warm once, filled with the smell of pancakes, her father's booming laugh, and the excited barking of the dogs he worked with. He had been a K-9 officer, tall and strong, with hands that could calm even the most aggressive police dog. Emily had adored him, followed him like a shadow. Every morning she'd watch him polish his boots and whisper to his K-9 partner, "All right, buddy, let's go keep people safe." And every single time he'd ruffle Emily's hair and say, "You've got the heart of a handler, too." Then one day, he didn't come home. Her mother had tried to explain. An operation gone wrong, an injury, a hospital far away. For months, they waited for news. Emily prayed every night with her father's silver button clutched in her fist. But the news never came. Her mother broke, little by little, her smile fading, her eyes growing dull from exhaustion. Bills piled up, meals grew smaller, and Emily learned quickly If she wanted anything in her life to survive, she had to fight for it herself. That was when the nightmares started. Emily would dream of dogs crying out. Police dogs like the ones her father worked with, injured, abandoned, locked away. She'd wake up with her heart pounding, a certainty gnawing at her chest that somewhere out there, a dog needed her. Weeks later, Emily overheard men at the market talking about a washed-up police dog being sold at the next ranch auction. Sick as death, one man had said. Won't last long. Most people wouldn't have cared, but Emily cared. She had stood frozen in the middle of the market aisle, her heart hammering. A police dog. Alone. Forgotten. Just like she couldn't finish the thought. That night, she took out the little metal lunchbox under her bed and counted every dollar she had collected. $18.42. Not much, but it was everything she owned. Her mother slept on the couch, exhausted from double shifts. Emily kissed her forehead, whispered, "I'll be back," and slipped out before dawn. She walked the whole way, 3 miles, no breakfast, no coat, just a child's stubborn hope and a father's silver button in her pocket. And when she reached the auction yard and saw the dog, shaking, coughing, ribs showing, she felt something inside her snap into place. This was the one. The dog from her dreams. The dog no one else saw value in. The dog who needed her as desperately as she needed him. As she carried him home now, the sun burning her shoulders and her arms trembling under his weight, Emily didn't think of the laughter behind her. She thought of her father's voice. "You've got the heart of a handler." She lifted her chin. Today, she finally believed it. By the time Emily reached the edge of town, her arms were numb. The dog, heavy despite his thin frame, rested limply against her chest, his breathing shallow but steady. She paused beneath the shade of a rusted bus stop sign, lowering him gently onto the cracked concrete. "Just a minute," she whispered, catching her breath. The German shepherd looked up at her with tired amber eyes, eyes that held stories she couldn't yet understand. Emily brushed dirt from his fur, wincing when she saw the old scars hidden beneath the patches of thinning hair. Some were deep, jagged. Others looked like burns. His left ear was torn at the tip. His hind leg bore a dark bruise that looked painfully fresh. Someone had hurt him, not once, many times. Emily swallowed hard. "What happened to you?" The dog's gaze drifted away, as if he didn't want her to see the memories behind them. And somewhere deep in his mind, they replayed. The sirens had blared first, sharp, deafening, urgent. He remembered the vibration of the police SUV beneath his paws, the tension in his handler's voice, the smell of gasoline and adrenaline mixed in the night air. His name then hadn't been Dog or Mutt. It was Shadow, a decorated K9, top of his unit, fearless, precise, loyal. He remembered the mission clearly, an undercover sting operation against a dangerous ring of smugglers. His handler, Officer Grant, had knelt beside him, whispering, "You're my best boy." "Stay close." Shadow had nudged his hand, ready to do whatever he was asked. Then everything went wrong. Gunshots, shouting, fire, explosions, a warehouse collapsing under its own weight. Shadow had dragged his injured handler from the debris, refusing to leave him behind. He had barked until help came. He had fought off attackers. He had done everything right. But not everyone wanted the operation exposed. Not everyone wanted the police to know the truth about what they had uncovered. Shadow had seen faces, cowboys, ranch hands, men who pretended to be ordinary locals but were tied to something far darker. They had recognized the dog, and instead of letting him be rescued with the other officers, they took him. They beat him, starved him, forced him into old stock pens like an animal no one cared about. Officer Grant never found him. No one did. Shadow waited every day for his handler to return, but as the weeks passed and the pain grew, his hope dimmed. His body weakened. His spirit cracked. By the time he was dragged to the auction yard, he no longer looked like a police dog. He looked like a dying stray. Back in the present, Shadow let out a soft whine, pressing his nose into Emily's palm. She blinked away tears she didn't remember forming. "It's okay," she murmured. "You're safe now, I promise." The dog hesitated, then slowly, carefully, placed his paw on her knee. A choice, a surrender, a trust. Emily didn't know the truth behind his scars. She didn't know the men who once hunted him were still out there. She didn't know she had just rescued the single witness to a crime no one believed existed. All she knew was that he had been hurt, and that she would never let anyone hurt him again. She gathered him back into her arms, determination burning in her small chest. "Come on, Shadow," she whispered. "Let's go home." And for the first time since he had lost his handler, the broken canine felt a flicker of something he feared he'd never feel again. Hope. By the time Emily reached her neighborhood, the sun hung low, casting long shadows across the dusty street. The dog, Shadow, rested against her shoulder, too weak to lift his head. Emily's legs trembled with each step, but she held on tightly, determined not to set him down again. It didn't take long for the neighbors to notice. Mrs. Harding, sweeping her porch, froze mid-stroke. "Good heavens, child! What is that poor creature?" Emily didn't slow. "He's mine now." A group of teenagers lounging near the corner store burst into laughter. "Where'd you get that walking skeleton?" One jeered. Another added, "Looks like a dog zombie." Emily kept walking. Old Mr. Turner, who always fed stray cats, frowned deeply. "That's no stray," he murmured, eyes narrowing at Shadow's scars. "That's a working dog. Or used to be." His words spread through the crowd forming behind Emily like a fuse catching flame. A police dog? From where? What happened to him? Speculation swirled. A woman shook her head, pitying Emily. "Sweetheart, he's too sick. You can't help him." Another whispered behind her hand, "Kids get attached too easily. She'll be heartbroken by morning." Emily clutched Shadow closer, her voice steady despite the ache in her arms. "I'm not giving up on him." From across the street, a tall rancher, one of the cowboys from the auction, leaned against his dusty pickup truck smirking. He had followed them silently the whole way, watching like a hawk circling prey. "Well, look at that," he drawled, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Little girl thinks she's saved herself a hero. Hate to break it to you, kid, but that dog's done for." Emily stiffened. Shadow let out a faint growl, but it was too weak to sound threatening. The rancher chuckled. "Hear that? Even he knows he ain't got long." Mr. Turner glared at the man. "If you were the one who brought that dog to auction, you ought to be ashamed. He's half dead." The rancher shrugged casually. "Not my problem." Dog wasn't good for anything anymore, just dead weight. Emily shot him a look sharper than any adult's. "He's not dead weight." Something about the firmness in her voice unsettled even the rancher. His smirk faltered for a second before returning. "Suit yourself," he said, pushing off the truck. "Just don't come crying when that mutt doesn't make it through the night." He walked away, boots crunching against gravel. The neighbors murmured among themselves, some sympathetic, others doubtful, but not a single person stepped forward to help her carry the dog. And Emily didn't ask. With trembling resolve, she lifted Shadow again and continued home, her jaw set, her eyes forward. Behind her, the whispers followed like a storm cloud. "That dog won't survive. She's wasting her time. Poor girl." But above all the murmurs, Shadow heard one voice, Emily's, soft, steady, full of conviction. "I've got you," she whispered, and as he rested his head against her shoulder, Shadow realized something. For the first time in a long time, someone actually meant it. By the time Emily reached her small house at the end of the street, dusk had settled in. painting the sky with streaks of orange and violet. She pushed the creaky wooden gate open with her foot, whispering encouragement to Shadow as he whimpered softly in her arms. "We're home. Just a little more." Inside, the house was quiet. Her mother wouldn't be home for hours. Another late shift at the diner. Emily gently set Shadow down on a worn quilt near the fireplace, the one she always used when storms frightened her at night. Shadow's legs buckled immediately, and he collapsed with a painful grunt. Emily's heart squeezed. "It's okay," she murmured, kneeling beside him. "I'll help you." She hurried to the kitchen, filling a bowl with warm water and another with leftover chicken broth she'd saved from yesterday. When she returned, Shadow sniffed the broth, but hesitated, as if unsure whether he was allowed to eat. "It's for you," she urged. After a long pause, he slowly, carefully, began to lap at the broth. Emily exhaled in relief. As he ate, Emily examined him more closely. His fur was tangled with burrs and dried mud. Old scars marked his body like a road map of pain. She ran her fingers lightly along his side, stopping when Shadow flinched from an invisible memory. "Who did this to you?" she whispered. Shadow looked away, ashamed, as though he thought his brokenness made him undeserving of comfort. Emily didn't touch him again. Instead, she busied herself setting up a little bed, a folded blanket, her softest pillow, and the old stuffed bear she used to sleep with as a toddler. When she placed the bear beside him, Shadow stared at it for a long second, confused but touched. Then night fell deeper. The house grew cold. Emily lit the fireplace the way her father had taught her, carefully, patiently. Soon a soft glow warmed the room. She sat cross-legged beside Shadow, gently brushing his coat with her small comb, untangling knots one by one. Shadow closed his eyes, relaxing under her careful touch. But the peace didn't last. Hours later, long after Emily had curled up beside him and drifted into an exhausted sleep, Shadow jerked awake. His body stiffened, his legs twitched, his breathing quickened. A soft whimper escaped him, then another, louder this time, almost a cry. Nightmare! His paws scrambled against the floor as if he were running, trying to flee something unseen. His teeth clenched. He growled, not at Emily, but at memories chasing him through the darkness. Emily shot awake, startled. Shadow? He didn't hear her. He was trapped. Without hesitation, she scooted closer and placed a gentle hand on his head. "Shh! You're safe. You're safe now." Her voice cut through the nightmare like a ray of light. Shadow's breathing slowed. His growls faded. His trembling eased until he finally collapsed against her side. Exhausted, Emily didn't move. She sat awake, stroking his fur, whispering comfort until his body fell still and calm again. And somewhere in that quiet moment, as the fire crackled softly beside them, Shadow made his first real choice since losing his handler. He nudged his nose into Emily's hand and stayed there. For the first time in a very long time, he slept without fear. And Emily understood something powerful. Healing didn't start with medicine. It started with trust. Morning sunlight crept through the thin curtains, brushing softly against Emily's face. She blinked awake, her cheek resting against Shadow's warm fur. He was still asleep, finally peaceful, his breath steady and quiet. Emily smiled. It was the first calm moment since she met him. She stretched her stiff arms and glanced over his body to check on him like a tiny nurse. His wounds were still raw, but he looked safe, different, as if one night in a warm home had already started to mend something inside him. But that's when she noticed something she hadn't seen before, a small piece of metal glinting beneath his tangled fur. Emily leaned closer, gently parting the hair around his collar. It wasn't like any dog tag she had ever seen. This one was old, scratched, and partially hidden inside a stitched leather flap. almost as if someone tried to conceal it. "What's this?" she whispered. Shadow opened one eye, watching her but not resisting. Slowly, Emily unfastened the collar buckle. The leather was cracked, stiff, and dark, as if it had been through fire or smoke. She turned it over in her hands until a thin metal plate slid out from a hidden slit along the inside. Her breath caught. It wasn't a regular ID tag. It was engraved deeply, purposefully. A series of numbers, a police insignia, a symbol she didn't recognize, sharp, triangular, official-looking, and intimidating. And beneath all of it, a single word nearly scratched off. Unit 9. Emily's heart beat faster. Her father had told her stories about Police K-9 units, about what their collars meant. The special engravings weren't decorations. They were used only for classified missions, ones too dangerous for public record. "What were you part of?" she murmured, running her fingers over the cold metal. Shadow's ears twitched. He lifted his head slowly, as if remembering something he wished he could forget. The metal plate wasn't the only surprise. On the inside of the collar, nearly invisible under soot and grime, Emily noticed faint black scorch marks, burn lines, like the collar had survived an explosion. Suddenly, the scars along Shadow's body made much more sense. He hadn't just been hurt. He had been in something catastrophic. Emily's stomach tightened. She glanced toward the door, half expecting someone to barge in demanding the collar back. Why had someone hidden this? Why wasn't Shadow brought back to the police force? Why sell him at an auction like trash, unless someone didn't want him found? Shadow whined softly, nudging her knee as if asking if she was all right. Emily forced a smile and brushed his ears. "It's okay. I'm just trying to understand you." She wiped the metal plate clean with her sleeve. The numbers gleamed slightly under the morning light. She knew she needed someone who could read them properly. Maybe a vet. Maybe someone from the police station. Someone who knew about K-9 units. But a nervous chill crawled through her chest. If the wrong people had hurt him, would asking questions put her in danger? A knock at the door made her jump. Shadow stiffened instantly. His body tensed, his head lifting in a way Emily hadn't seen before. Alert, focused, protective. The transformation was startling. He looked like a police dog again, even in his weakened state. Emily tucked the metal plate under her pillow instinctively. Another knock, louder this time. Shadow growled, a deep, warning sound. Emily's heart pounded. No one ever visited this early. "Shadow, what are you sensing?" she whispered. The dog's eyes stayed locked on the door. Whoever was standing on the porch. Shadow knew them, and he didn't trust them. The knocking grew harder. Emily froze, her breath caught halfway in her throat. Shadow stood slowly, painfully, placing himself between her and the door. His posture was shaky, but something fierce burned in his eyes. His ears pinned forward, his tail stiff, every muscle trembling with instinct. Another knock, this time followed by a rough voice. "Hello? Anyone home? Need to ask you something." Emily swallowed. She didn't recognize the voice, and Shadow's low, vibrating growl told her everything she needed to know. Whoever was outside wasn't safe. The doorknob rattled. Shadow bared his teeth. Emily whispered urgently, "Shadow, stay quiet." But he didn't. His growl grew louder, deeper, coming from a place inside him that had once taken down criminals and saved officers' lives. Even weak, his instincts were razor-sharp. Emily took one cautious step backward, clutching the collar's metal plate beneath her shirt. Her heartbeat thudded against it. She had the sudden, terrifying feeling that whoever was at the door wasn't just a stranger. They were looking for something, or someone. The door creaked open an inch. Shadow lunged. He threw his body forward with surprising force, slamming into the door. It shut violently, vibrating on its hinges. Emily gasped. Shadow stood there, trembling, but refusing to move away from his guard position. "Hey!" the man shouted from outside. "What's wrong with that dog? I just want to talk." Emily pushed her shaking hands against the door, her small palms barely covering half its width. "Go away," she shouted. The man chuckled, a cold, unsettling sound. "You bought a dog yesterday, didn't you? At the auction?" Emily's blood ran cold. Shadow snarled so fiercely that spit flew from his teeth. "Open up," the man continued. "I just need to see something. Please leave," Emily said, her voice breaking. Silence followed, a long, heavy silence. Then a whisper barely audible through the door. "You shouldn't have taken him." Shadow erupted, barking in a way Emily had never heard before. Violent, protective, desperate. The man cursed and stepped back, boots crunching against gravel. Emily didn't breathe until the fading footsteps disappeared down the street. Only then did Shadow collapse beside the door, panting from the effort. Emily dropped to her knees and wrapped her arms around him. "You protected me," she whispered, tears slipping down her cheeks. "You really protected me?" Shadow pressed his head into her chest, exhausted but alert, his eyes still fixed on the door as if expecting danger to return. Emily held him tighter. Her world had just shifted. This wasn't just a sick dog. This wasn't just an injured stray. Shadow had reacted like a trained officer because he was one, and someone out there wanted him back. Not because they cared about him, but because he knew something they didn't want revealed. In that quiet living room, with the morning sun spilling across the floor, Emily made a decision. No matter what came next, she would not let them take him. Not now, not ever. Emily didn't sleep the rest of the night. Every creak of the house, every rustle of wind outside made her sit up, heart pounding. Shadow lay beside her, his body curled protectively around her legs despite his injuries. He didn't rest either. His ears twitched at every sound, his eyes flicking toward the door as if expecting the stranger to return. By morning, Emily knew she had to act. Shadow needed medical help, and she needed answers. She slipped her father's old backpack over her shoulders, gently coaxed Shadow to his feet, and opened the back door so they could avoid the main street. The sun was barely up, casting cool light over their path as they walked the long mile to Dr. Bennett's tiny veterinary clinic on the outskirts of town. Shadow limped heavily, but he stayed right beside her, matching her pace. Whenever she slowed to check on him, he nudged her forward with his nose, as if telling her, "We have to do this." When they reached the clinic, the bell above the door jingled weakly. Dr. Bennett, an older woman with silver glasses and a tired smile, looked up from her paperwork. "Emily, what are you doing here so ear—" Her voice cut off the moment she saw Shadow. "Oh, my goodness!" She rushed around the counter, kneeling beside him. Her hands, gentle yet practiced, moved over his ribs, his spine, his trembling legs. Shadow didn't growl, but he watched her cautiously. "Where did you get this dog, Doctor?" Bennett asked softly. Emily swallowed. "I bought him." "Bought him from where?" "The ranch auction." Dr. Bennett's face hardened, an expression Emily had never seen from her before. She stood abruptly. "Bring him into the exam room. Now." Emily helped guide Shadow inside. Once the door was closed, Dr. Bennett began her examination with a seriousness that made Emily's stomach twist. Shadow whimpered when she touched a bruise along his flank. He flinched at pressure on his ribs. He winced when she lifted his paw. "Multiple untreated fractures," Dr. Bennett murmured. "Signs of blunt trauma. These scars, these burns." Her jaw tightened. This wasn't an accident. Emily bit her lip. "Can you help him? I'll do everything I can," the vet said firmly as she continued examining him. Her fingers brushed something inside Shadow's collar. Emily froze, instinctively placing her hand over her pocket where she had hidden the metal plate. Dr. Bennett noticed. "Emily," she said gently, "is there something you want to show me?" Emily hesitated. She didn't want to betray Shadow, but she trusted Dr. Bennett. She had taken care of every animal Emily ever brought in. Slowly, she pulled out the engraved plate. Dr. Bennett's reaction was immediate. Her eyes widened. Her hand flew to her mouth. She stumbled back a step. "Where did you get this?" "It was inside his collar," Emily whispered. "What does it mean?" Dr. Bennett turned the metal over, tracing the numbers with trembling fingers. This is a restricted identification tag. I haven't seen one in years. Unit 9 was a specialized law enforcement team. High-risk operations. Undercover stings. Dogs assigned to this unit aren't just trained, they're classified assets. Emily blinked. Classified? Yes. Dr. Bennett looked at Shadow with newfound astonishment. This dog wasn't just a police dog, Emily. He was elite. One of the highest trained dogs in the state. Emily's throat tightened. She had suspected he was special, but hearing it felt overwhelming. If he was so important, Emily asked, why was he at an auction? Why didn't anyone come for him? Dr. Bennett's expression darkened. That's the real question, isn't it? She lowered her voice. Someone hid this tag. Someone wanted him lost. Shadow whimpered softly, as if confirming her suspicion. Dr. Bennett straightened. Emily, we need to report this. No, Emily blurted, gripping Shadow's fur. If we tell the wrong people, they might take him away. They might hurt him again. Dr. Bennett hesitated, torn. Finally, she sighed. All right, not yet. We'll keep this between us for now. But whoever came to your house this morning, her eyes were grave. They're not done. Emily shivered. Shadow leaned against her protectively, his warm breath steadying her trembling hands. No matter what danger lurked outside, Emily knew one thing for certain. She and Shadow were no longer just surviving. They were uncovering something much bigger. And someone, somewhere, wanted to stop them. Emily kept glancing over her shoulder the entire walk home from the vet. Shadow limped beside her, bandaged and exhausted, but alert. Far more alert than before. Every sound made him tense. Every passing car made him shift his stance, placing himself between Emily and the road. Dr. Bennett's warning replayed in her mind. They're not done. Emily didn't know who they were, but she had a feeling she was about to find out. By late afternoon, her mother had returned home and was napping on the couch, worn out from a double shift. Emily tucked Shadow beside her bed, whispering promises of safety, then crept to the kitchen to warm some broth for him. That's when the gravel outside crunched. Slow, heavy, purposeful. Shadow's ears shot up. A low growl rolled through his chest like distant thunder. Emily peeked through the window, and her stomach dropped. 2 men stood at the gate, the same 2 men from the auction. The loud cowboy with a smirk, and another she hadn't noticed before. Taller, broader, his face hidden beneath the shadow of a black hat. They weren't laughing now. They weren't mocking her. They looked angry, determined. The taller man rattled the gate latch. It's locked, he muttered. Well, she has the dog, the cowboy said. We're not leaving till we get him. Emily backed away from the window so fast she almost tripped. Shadow limped closer, positioning himself directly between her and the door. His growl deepened, vibrating through the floorboards. A fist slammed against the door. Open up, the cowboy shouted. We just want to talk. Emily's hand shook. She didn't respond. Another slam shook the frame. We know you took the dog, girl. We need to collect something that belongs to us. Shadow barked, sharp, commanding enough to make the men outside pause. That mutt again, the cowboy spat. Should have put him down when we had the chance. Emily gasped quietly. Shadow snarled, teeth bared. The taller man stepped closer to the door. His voice was lower, colder, more dangerous than the cowboy's. The dog was part of an operation that wasn't supposed to go public. He has something that belongs to us. Give him over and no one gets hurt. Emily's pulse hammered in her ears. They weren't here for Shadow because they cared. They were here because he knew something, something important, something dangerous. And then the cowboy said something that made Emily's blood run cold. "Once we've got him, we'll take care of the kid too. Make sure she doesn't go telling anyone what she saw." Shadow exploded. He lunged at the door so violently that it shook on its hinges. His bark wasn't weak now. It was full force, full volume, the roar of a trained K9 ready to defend his own life and hers. The men stumbled back. "Crazy dog! Move away from the door!" Emily dropped to her knees beside Shadow, gripping his fur, whispering, "It's okay. I'm here. I'm here." Another slam rattled the house. "Open this door, or we'll break it down!" Emily's breath shook. Shadow didn't waver. He stood tall, injured, trembling, but unbreakable, blocking the doorway like a soldier making his final stand. Emily crawled backward toward the hallway, dragging Shadow with her as best she could. "We need to hide," she whispered. Shadow looked at her, then the door, then back at her, and he understood. He followed her, not because he feared the men, but because his mission was clear: protect her at any cost. The doorknob twisted violently. The men had decided they weren't leaving without Shadow, or Emily. The doorknob twisted again, harder this time. Emily froze mid-step, her back pressed to the hallway wall. Shadow stood beside her, trembling from pain, but ready, his eyes locked on the door like a soldier awaiting the enemy's next move. On three, the cowboy growled from outside. One, Shadow's ears snapped forward. Two, he crouched low despite his injuries, muscles tightening. Three! Before the last number dropped, the door burst inward with a deafening crack. Emily screamed. Shadow exploded. The injured German shepherd launched himself forward with a force that shocked even Emily. His body may have been broken, but his training wasn't. He slammed into the cowboy's legs, sending the man stumbling backward off the porch. "Get him off me!" the cowboy yelled, scrambling in the dirt. The taller man stepped inside, towering in the dim light of the living room. His eyes swept the small house with precision, looking not for Emily, but for Shadow. "There you are," he muttered coldly. Shadow skidded back inside, placing himself between Emily and the intruder. His growls echoed off the walls, deeper and louder than any she'd heard before. It wasn't fear, it was warning, command, instinct. The man reached into his coat. Emily's stomach dropped. Shadow moved first. He lunged not at the man's arm but at his wrist, where a faint chemical scent lingered. A scent Shadow recognized, a scent tied to the warehouse explosion he'd survived. The moment his teeth snapped near it, a memory slammed through him like a flash of lightning. Masks, barrels, smoke. This man had been there. Emily saw the realization ignite in Shadow's eyes, saw him transform from a trembling, sick animal into the elite K9 he once was. He barked so fiercely the intruder flinched, stepping back in shock. The cowboy staggered to his feet outside. "What's taking so long? Grab the dog." Shadow advanced, each step deliberate. Emily had never seen a dog move like this. Injured, yes, but every motion purposeful, strategic, a warrior remembering his battle stance. The tall man cursed under his breath. "Stupid mutt! I should have finished you when I had the chance." He lunged forward. Shadow didn't retreat. He didn't hesitate. He attacked. His jaws clamped onto the man's sleeve, yanking him off balance. The man crashed into the coffee table, shattering it. Emily gasped and stumbled backward, nearly falling into the hallway. "Shadow!" she cried, but Shadow didn't look back. He didn't need to. His focus was absolute, his purpose singular. Protect Emily. The cowboy charged inside, wielding a heavy metal tool. "Move, dog!" Shadow released the tall man and spun toward the second threat. He lunged again, biting down on the cowboy's boot, twisting sharply. The cowboy screamed, dropping the tool with a loud clang. Emily ducked behind the hallway wall, tears streaming down her face. She wanted to help, but knew she couldn't. Shadow was fighting with everything he had, and she couldn't break his focus. "Let's go," the tall man yelled, limping toward the door. "Forget the dog. We'll come back." The cowboy grabbed his hat, hobbled out, and the two men retreated, tripping over each other in their hurry. Shadow chased them to the doorway but didn't step outside. He stood there, chest heaving, teeth bared, protecting the house like it was the last safe place on earth. Only when their truck roared away did he collapse onto the rug, panting hard. Emily rushed to him, wrapping her arms around his neck. "You saved me," she whispered, shaking. Shadow pressed his nose to her wrist, and in that single, trembling gesture, Emily understood. He remembered everything, and he wasn't running any more. Emily held Shadow's trembling body close, her fingers buried in his fur as he struggled to catch his breath. His wounds had reopened, staining the rug beneath him. Yet his eyes, sharp, alert, burning with purpose, never left the front door. He knew they would return, and Emily knew it too. She pressed her forehead to his. "We need help, real help." Shadow nudged her hand, urging her to stand. Even injured, he wanted her to move, to act. Emily swallowed her fear and walked to the window, peeking through a sliver in the curtain. The street looked empty, too empty. A cold chill slid down her spine. Shadow followed her gaze, ears pinned back. Then his nose twitched sharply. His entire posture changed. He stepped closer to the window, sniffing the air with rising urgency. "What is it?" Emily whispered. Shadow growled, not loud, not threatening, a warning. Emily looked again and froze. The men were back. Their truck sat partially hidden behind Mr. Turner's tool shed across the street. The cowboy leaned against it, rubbing his injured leg. The taller man was pacing, furious, waving his arms as he spoke into a phone. Emily couldn't hear the words, but she could read their faces. They were done playing games. "We have to hide," she whispered to Shadow. "Now." Shadow turned, not toward the hallway or her bedroom, but toward the back door. He nudged it once, then looked at her as though giving her a command. "You want to go outside?" He nudged again, then trotted, limping, toward the old barn at the back of their property. Emily hesitated. "Shadow, we can't go out there. They'll see us." Shadow barked softly, insisting. His entire body tensed with a strange energy she hadn't seen since the confrontation. He wasn't afraid of the barn. He wanted to go to it. Why? Emily grabbed the metal plate from under her pillow, shoved it into her pocket, and followed him out the back door. They darted across the yard, keeping low behind the bushes. The wind was still. The world felt brittle, like one wrong move would shatter everything. Shadow led her into the barn. The moment they stepped inside, his behavior changed. His nose went to the floor, sniffing rapidly. He circled the barn once, twice, then stopped at a corner beneath an old wooden shelf. He barked, sharp, urgent. Emily rushed over. "What? What is it?" Shadow scratched at the floorboards. Emily dropped to her knees and pulled aside the loose straw covering the spot. Beneath it, she saw a flat wooden plank, different from the others, newer, fit perfectly into place like a lid. Her heart pounded. "What is this?" Shadow growled softly, urging her on. Emily dug her fingers into the plank's edge and pulled. It lifted with a groan. Underneath was a hidden compartment, small, dark, and filled with something wrapped in a tarp. Emily's breath caught. She unwrapped it slowly, hands shaking, until the contents revealed themselves. Documents, USB drives, chemical containers with warning labels, photographs of masked men in a warehouse lit with barrels and firelight. Shadow let out a deep, mournful whine. This was the evidence, the truth he had protected, the truth someone wanted buried. The barn door slammed open. Emily screamed and spun around. The cowboy stormed inside, eyes blazing. "Found what we were looking for, huh?" Shadow stepped in front of her. The taller man entered behind him, blocking the escape, his hand tightening around a metal crowbar. "No more running," he snarled. Emily grabbed Shadow's fur with both hands, but Shadow didn't back up, didn't tremble, didn't hide. He positioned himself between Emily and the men, ready to make his last stand. Shadow stood between Emily and the two men, his injured body trembling, but unyielding. The barn felt smaller now, the air tighter as dust floated in the sunlight like trembling sparks. The cowboy cracked his knuckles and stepped forward. "Move, Mutt," he growled. "You got in our way long enough." Shadow didn't move. Emily clutched his back, her fingers digging into his fur. "Leave us alone," she whispered, though her voice trembled. The tall man lifted the crowbar, its metal glinting. "We should have finished that dog the night of the explosion. He knows too much." Shadow growled, a deep rolling sound that echoed through the barn. "Careful," the cowboy muttered. "He'll bite. He's half dead." The tall man snapped. "Let him try." With a sharp swing, the crowbar slashed downward. Shadow lunged. His jaws clamped onto the crowbar mid-air, yanking it sideways with surprising strength. Pain shot through him, but he pushed through it, twisting until the tall man stumbled backward with a curse. Emily grabbed the tarp full of evidence, clutching it to her chest. "Shadow, we have to run!" But Shadow wasn't finished. He shoved the crowbar away and positioned himself again, blocking the men from reaching her. His legs trembled violently, but his eyes, those fierce, loyal eyes, held steady. The cowboy sneered. "You don't get it, kid. That dog won't save you. No one's coming." And for a terrifying moment, Emily believed him, until a distant wail pierced the air. Sirens. The men froze. Shadow's ears snapped upward. Emily's breath caught. Sirens, growing louder, closer, racing down the gravel road toward the property. "What? Who called them?" the tall man barked. Emily's voice shook, but she managed to say, "Dr. Bennett. She must have told someone. No, no, no. This wasn't supposed to get out." The cowboy shouted, panic breaking through his bravado. The tall man grabbed his arm. "We need the evidence. Forget the girl. Get the drives." He lunged for Emily. Shadow launched himself at the man with everything he had left. His body collided with the intruder's chest, knocking him off balance. The crowbar clattered to the floor. "Get off me!" the man yelled, wrestling with the dog. Shadow snapped at his sleeve, dragging the man down. His movements were slower now, weaker, but he refused to let go. Emily stumbled backward toward the barn door, but the cowboy blocked her path. "You're not going anywhere," he snarled, reaching for her arm. Bang! A gunshot cracked through the air. Everyone froze. The cowboy's hand hovered inches from Emily. The tall man stopped struggling beneath Shadow's weight. Dust settled like snowflakes. Outside, the sirens cut off. "Police!" a voice boomed. "Hands where we can see them!" In seconds, officers flooded the barn, weapons raised. The cowboy immediately lifted his hands. The tall man tried to stand, but Shadow remained on top of him, teeth bared, growling low. Two officers rushed forward. "Get the dog! Careful! He's protecting the girl! No!" Emily cried. "He's not dangerous. He saved me." The officers paused, exchanging a glance, then slowly approached. Another officer stepped forward, kneeling. His gaze drifted over Shadow's scars, then to the metal tag Emily clutched in her hand. "Unit 9, he whispered, stunned. "Where did you find this dog?" Emily swallowed. They were hiding him. They hurt him. They were going to take him again. The officer looked at the cowboy and the tall man with a rage Emily wasn't expecting. "We've been searching for this dog for months. He was part of an undercover case that exposed an illegal chemical operation. These men—" He jabbed a finger toward the intruders, were wanted for the attack that destroyed the evidence. The tall man spat bitterly. The dog survived. He shouldn't have. The officer stepped forward. And now, because of this girl, because of this dog, we finally have enough to convict all of you. Shadow released the man's sleeve only when Emily whispered gently, "It's okay, boy. They're here." Police cuffed the suspects and dragged them out, shouting commands. The barn emptied until only Emily, Shadow, and one officer remained. The officer knelt beside Shadow, who collapsed from exhaustion into Emily's lap. "You did good, buddy," the officer murmured softly. "Your handler would have been proud." Emily stroked Shadow's fur, tears falling silently. "He's mine now," she whispered. "I won't let anything happen to him." The officer smiled gently. "After what he did today, I think he chose you." Shadow lifted his head just enough to lick Emily's hand. Outside, the sun burned bright. Justice had arrived. But the biggest shock was still coming, because Shadow wasn't just a hero from the past. He was about to become the hero of Emily's future. The police officers finished gathering every piece of evidence from the hidden compartment, photos, chemical samples, encrypted drives, placing them carefully into sealed bags. Emily watched from the barn doorway, one hand resting protectively on Shadow's head. The adrenaline that had carried her through the danger was fading now, leaving her trembling, overwhelmed, and exhausted. Yet she didn't let go of him. Shadow leaned against her leg, barely upright, but proud. So proud. "Emily," an officer said gently as he approached. He was older, with soft eyes and a badge that glinted under the barn's rafters. "We're going to take these men into custody. You're safe now." Emily nodded, but her gaze stayed locked on Shadow. What's going to happen to him?" The officer hesitated, then knelt at her side. "He was a K-9 in one of the most dangerous units we ever had. After the warehouse explosion, we thought he was dead. When no body was found, we assumed the criminals took him. That's why this case went cold." Emily's heart squeezed. "He saved people, didn't he?" The officer nodded. "He saved his handler's life more than once." Emily swallowed hard. "Then why didn't anyone come searching for him?" His voice softened. "We did, for months. But those men hid him well. We never lost hope. We just didn't know where to look." Shadow nudged the officer's hand, a tired but familiar gesture of recognition. The man smiled, grief flickering in his eyes. "I worked with your handler," he whispered to the dog. "Grant would be so proud you survived." Emily's breath hitched. "His handler, is he—" The officer paused. Then he shook his head slowly. "He didn't make it." Emily covered her mouth, tears filling her eyes. She looked at Shadow, and in his silent, wounded gaze, she understood the depth of his loss. The nightmares, the scars, the way he hesitated to trust. Shadow hadn't just lost a partner. He had lost family. Emily wrapped her arms around him, whispering through trembling lips, "It's okay. You're not alone anymore." Shadow pressed into her, closing his eyes. It was the first moment of true peace he had felt since that terrible night. After the suspects were transported and the barn quieted, the officers gathered near Emily and her mother, who had arrived moments earlier, pale and frantic after waking to find her daughter and dog missing. The lead detective stepped forward. "Emily, we have a request," he said gently. "He's technically government property, a trained K-9. Emily stiffened, tightening her grip on Shadow. "You're not taking him?" Her mother placed a calming hand on her shoulder. "Sweetheart." Emily shook her head violently. "He's been hurt enough. They abandoned him. I found him. I saved him. He saved me." Shadow shifted weakly, his body leaning against her for support. The detective raised his hands calmly. "We understand. Truly. But listen first." Emily blinked tears away. "The K-9 unit was officially disbanded after the explosion. the detective explained. There's no active claim on Shadow anymore. Legally, he belongs to the state, but he smiled softly. Given everything he's been through and everything he's done, we believe he's earned the right to decide where he belongs. Emily's breath caught. Decide? The officer nodded. We'll honor his choice. Shadow looked at Emily. Emily looked at Shadow. There was no hesitation. Shadow moved toward her, pressing his head into her chest. The officer chuckled. Well, that settles that. Emily broke into tears, hugging Shadow tightly. Her mother wrapped her arms around both of them, overcome with emotion. He's yours, Emily, the detective said. Officially, permanently. You're his handler now. Emily's jaw dropped. Handler? I can be? But I'm only 10. You won't be doing police work, he laughed. But we can grant you the title of Honorary Junior Canine Handler. You saved a dog who saved countless lives. You should be recognized. Shadow wagged his tail weakly, but proudly. A week later, the town gathered outside the small police station. Reporters, neighbors, officers in uniform. Even the ones who had doubted Shadow were there. Emily walked in, wearing a little vest the officers had made for her, stitched with the words, K9 Shadow, partner of Emily Dawson, honorary junior handler. Shadow wore a custom vest too, soft to protect his injuries, with a new silver tag engraved, Shadow, hero of Unit 9, forever partnered. When Emily stepped forward to receive her certificate, Shadow limped beside her, head high. The crowd erupted in applause. Tears glistened in the eyes of strangers. Officers saluted him. Children reached to pet him. And the cowboy from the auction, now behind bars, could only watch the ceremony on the news, realizing the dog he had tossed aside had become a legend. As the sun set on the ceremony and Emily walked home with Shadow, she whispered, We're a team now. You and me. Shadow bumped her hand with his nose. Emily smiled. You saved me. I saved you. That makes us family. Shadow let out a soft, contented sigh. For the first time since losing his handler, he felt whole again. For the first time in her life, Emily felt unstoppable. And together, they were just getting started. This story teaches us that true strength isn't found in size, age, or status, but in compassion, courage, and the willingness to stand up for what's right. A 10-year-old girl with hardly any money and no power saved a life simply because she refused to look away from someone who needed help. And a broken police dog, despite his pain and trauma, chose to trust again because one child showed him kindness. Their bond reminds us that healing often begins with love, and that even the smallest actions can spark the biggest changes. When we protect the vulnerable, speak up against injustice, and show empathy even when the world doesn't, we create the kind of world we all want to live in. If this story touched your heart, consider liking, sharing, and subscribing to support more inspiring and educational stories like this.